naturally. And the more you know the person, the more you can adjust your communication to to use language that is going to get through to that person. Like if you know the person well, you can communicate with them more effectively in many cases, just kind of broadly. So I think just knowing. So a really simple question I ask sometimes when other developers ask me for feedback is like, what stage of, like, where are you at in development? What type of feedback are you looking for? And that can cause them to be more introspective about, like, hey, we're 3 weeks away from shipping. The game is just about done. We're looking for, but having said that, any feedback right now is welcome because we're going to hear about it in reviews. But then if there's any small stuff that, that you found distracting or whatever, that's the kind of stuff we would really want to know about. Blah, blah, blah. That just knowing that type of information up front can help. And then I think the other thing is I always like to speak to the promise of a game, what it was doing, how it was working for me, what was going well about it, and then what parts of it, maybe didn't fit with the rest of that experience. So I think framing it in a constructive way, not like blowing smoke or anything, right? But just like coming at it from the perspective that things can always be better, and there's always a good idea, or not always, right? But there's very frequently a good idea at the heart of something that's just sort of trying to break free. Yeah, so that's a long-winded answer, but the short summary, like I said, is just trying not to give feedback blind and trying to be mindful of the stage of development the game is in and the people who will be receiving the feedback and sort of communicating with them accordingly in terms that will be constructive, because your goal as a feedback giver is to be constructive and to help to try to provide helpful feedback. Oh, one last thing I want to add is I think we ask for this explicitly. Hades was developed in early access. We welcomed all sorts of feedback, but we said the feedback that we value the most is the player's personal experience. Like, when in doubt, just describe your experience. Say how you felt. Say what confused you. Say what you enjoyed. Say what you didn't enjoy. You don't need to speculate about what will other people do. You don't need to say, like, oh, I got what you were going for, but I'm worried that other people, may not understand this. I'm an experienced game player, so this wasn't difficult for me, but I worry it might be difficult for other people. Like, don't worry about that. Just say your own experience, because a developer should be gathering feedback from many different types of people. And if the game is too hard for certain types of people, they'll hear from those people. Like, you're not responsible to give feedback on behalf of people who are not yourself. So, but I find that often, like there's a temptation to make to generalize beyond one's personal experience when giving feedback, and I find that type of feedback can while well intentioned, often can be misleading, I think.
Yeah, I want to say, Greg, that I loved how you talked about communication and feedback in that way, to a level where, yeah, constructive feedback is great. However, you within your team, it sounds like you break it down to certain specific levels, to the point where, like, no, like, really, like, let's dig into what this feedback is about. At what point in time are we receiving this feedback? How is it relevant to what we're doing? Because a lot of times I think developers, they look for this information, and at a very high level, it can be misleading to some ways because the feedback that you're getting might not be the feedback that you need. So it's really great to know that you guys have the system in place where, depending on where you are with development, you can be really focused on what that feedback is and what at what point in time and what really matters at that point in time. Because otherwise, I'm assuming anyways, it could put you on a different direction that you may not want to go in. And then the second part too with the players, I that's great because it's like at the end of the day, like you said, it's all about that player experience and really catering to that to the understanding of, because that's a part of the feedback that you probably don't get the most of unless you're like setting those expectations ahead of time.
Yeah, and it's and like I said, it's really the most valuable. Like and it's connected to the other thing I said. It's like because players don't have as much context for the state of the project as the developers do naturally, right? Mm-hmm. So and this isn't just players. This is like, again, it could be a developer to developer playtest. Like there's a temptation to recommend solutions, like, but the solutions I think tend to best come from the development team as a result of hearing the personal feedback. So to give an example, it's like, oh, I found like I didn't know that I had a special move, like I played for 5 hours before I knew I could do this special move, and boy, it would have really changed my experience had I known that I had the special move available. Why don't you should teach the special move right from the beginning. So like that part of that's the part that I think is like less valuable than the initial feedback. The initial feedback of like, I didn't know I had this really cool special move until the 5 hour point. To a developer, they're like, okay, like either they might read that feedback and be like, good, we meant for this to be discoverable and we're okay with this being discovered 5 hours in. Right. Or they might go, oh my God, this is core to the gameplay and it's like a failure of the tutorialization of the game that this did not come across. So we need to create a new scenario that introduces this move, blah, 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 blah. But like the solution can come from the team based on what they feel the game needs. Whereas like having the kind of suggestion box style feedback, I think it's tough because that's the kind of feedback when it's just suggestions and stuff that may not align with where the developer is taking the game, what resources they even have to make it, right? Like the suggestions may be totally out of scope for the team. The suggestions are still valuable because it's good to know what games create expectations when you play them, and it's good to know what players end up like, where a game leaves a player wanting, right? Like, oh, if only it had this, if only it had that. It's important for a developer to know about that stuff, because if your game has too many of these, like, if only it had this and that, it can be a disappointing game because it doesn't sort of deliver on the promise that it sets out to create. So it's as we can see here, I guess, like feedback giving is, I think, ultimately quite complicated to do it well, and it's a process we're always like learning and improving at. I think because at especially like early on in development when an idea is still like kind of nascent, it's still being formed. It's really easy for feedback to be crushing and to sort of stifle, like it's hard to make that judgment call of like, is this idea not yet fully realized, or is it an idea that, or should a different idea be pursued altogether? And that's something where like I don't have an answer to how to do that well. That's like our experience and instincts have to come into play there. But we do know that those early ideas, they're like little fledglings, right? They're like very vulnerable. So it's if an early idea has promise, we and people on team care about it a lot, we have to give it a chance. But knowing what a chance is, quote unquote, is important. And how many times do you sort of take a stab at something before you decide, okay, this isn't working? Like with a design idea, for example, like how many times do you try a certain mechanic or a prototype before you realize, okay, this isn't coming through, that we're really struggling with this. So I think we have pretty good instincts around that at this point, where we're willing to try something, a good couple of times at least before saying, okay, this has the feeling of a real struggle, and we know from past experience that when we're struggling this way, it means that there's probably a different solution here that would work better than the one that we're pursuing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to try to take this in a little bit of a different direction now, where, because it's a good segue from what you were sharing just now too, about getting that feedback, getting that clear understanding of what that player experience is like. But aside from design and development, player immersion can go well beyond gameplay. So what was the evolution of serving your community like, and how integral has it been to maintaining that overall experience with Supergiant's brand?
You mean, how do you mean, as far, you talked about immersion and then
yes,
serving our community? Can you
sure.
elaborate more? Yeah.
So specifically, you can get player immersion in terms of playing the actual game, but then outside of just any of your games or anything like that, when you're serving your community as a whole, to the extent that you communicate with them and interact with them and everything, how has that been an integral part of what you guys do in maintaining that player experience, that fan experience is probably a better way of putting it, and maintaining that with Supergiant's brand?
Yeah, so how we communicate to our players and customers, essentially.
Yep.
That's been, so in a word, it's been really, really important from the start. Among my responsibilities that I didn't mention, I run our Twitter account myself, and have done that since the beginning, and that's grown from not existing to now we're close to 300,000 followers or something like that. So we're just shy of 300,000 followers on Twitter. So that comes with a certain amount of pressure, right? It's like anything you tweet out, a lot of people are going to see it. And that's only the people that it reaches directly, right? It can be retweeted and whatever and reach a bunch more people. And we have a Discord community that's grown. When did we start? I believe we launched our Discord in 2018. It was earlier the year that Hades was announced. And what are we up to now? We're
I think I checked it recently. You guys are right over 15,000, right?
We're over 60,000 members on Discord now.
On Discord. Oh, yeah. So just one channel I was looking at. Sorry.
Yeah. So the Discord. Yeah. So our Discord is pretty substantial too, for in a reasonable amount of time. We kind of we try to have the same values in communicating to our players that kind of our game. We try to be consistent, if nothing else. I think we just try to have a forthright and kind demeanor when it comes to our players and customers. We try not to we try to communicate only when we have something to say, as it were. We're pretty. I would describe us as pretty kind of straight-laced in our communication with our community. We don't if people want to meme it up, that's fine, but we don't typically participate in that ourselves. I think personally that it can be sort of, I don't know. I don't always think that when brands act like they're your buddy on Reddit, that it comes across the way that they hope. So we would rather just be direct, and we read every email that we get. We actively participate in our Discord, try to set simple rules around our community there. Of the first and foremost rule is to be kind, which is purposely a broad rule, but we think an intuitive rule as well. And we've kind of our ability to communicate with our players has sort of grown over time through these different channels. We also have like an email mailing list and that sort of thing.